All right. Good morning, Facebook. Happy Monday. Uh, it's, Ke- it's your it's your loving Kevin Lee or the Kevin Lee. Having another dog talk interview and with none other than my friend Julie, who actually does who actually my admin for my business. She's amazing. Um, but before we go into our topic, Julie, do you want to do an intro for yourself, your background, and what you do?
For myself, yes. I've been training dogs 13 years now, I think. And I got started by adopting a dog. And then I realized the rescues needed fosters. And so that's how I got into it. And then I adopted a dog, Annie, who ended up needing some training because she was being very naughty. And I hired my friend, mentor Phyllis Smuland. And after I saw her work with dogs, I was hooked. And I wanted to know like how she did what she does and how she knew what she knows and how she basically came in and changed my dogs in 2 hours to be nice, well-behaved dogs. So I started kind of stalking her. And I would just, she said, hey, if you need help, call me. And I did. I took advantage of that, which I think if someone offers that to any new trainers out there, take advantage of it. And that's how I learned kind of how to train dogs. And then I got involved with the IACP and kind of expanded my little realm, and took workshops with other trainers. And I moved to New Mexico. And that's how I really got involved with fearful dogs. I had fostered a lot of fearful dogs before. I mean, we definitely had them in Virginia where I lived before. It was mostly a lot of hounds that were, kept as hunting dogs and mistreated and things like that. And I think it suits my personality well, better than like aggressive dogs. And when I moved out here, there's just such a great need for help with fearful dogs. New Mexico is like a third world country as far as animals is concerned. And there is a lot of abuse, neglect, hoarding cases. People actually move here knowing the animal welfare laws aren't enforced to breed and hoard dogs. So that's how I kind of got involved in that kind of hardcore, let's say. And then about 3 years ago, there was a big hoarding case that I was called in just to evaluate the dogs to see what kind of damage was done by the hoarder. And this was in case the hoarder was taken to court, so we could prove kind of some damage that was done to the dogs. And that was working with the shelter in Las Vegas, New Mexico. And once I went up there, and saw all these dogs that needed help, I just started working with them as much as I could. It's a 2-hour drive from where I live, so I would go up there as much as I could. And a lot of the dogs I was told when I took the case, I was told, I've never seen dogs this broken from the person that called me. And she had been doing rescue for 10 years. So I was like, wow, I wonder what's going on. And she was right. I went up there and I saw dogs in states I've never seen them before. And then I called our friend, Nelson Hodges. And I was like, help, Nelson, what do I do? Because there were total, this lady had 96 dogs. So there are a lot of dogs, but the shelter only had, I think, 32. And it was kind of a unique situation. So the dogs were actually being held with the court case. So they had to be kept at the shelter until the hoarder released custody of the dogs. And that ended up being 10 months time that they had to be kept alive at the shelter, which was actually a blessing for me. It was a blessing for the dogs. It was a blessing for everyone that, got to learn from these dogs. Because let's be honest, a lot of shelters would have just euthanized them because they were so severe. But because the shelter actually couldn't and they didn't want to, they wanted to learn how to help them. We organized this workshop with Nelson. He came out and I saw him work with dogs like this and learned how to help them. And then after that, it kind of grew. A couple of the shelter workers were really interested. And so now they're helping me run the workshop. One of them is actually the manager of the shelter now. So that's super cool. And now she just took the information and ran with it too. Like she's amazing. And so that's kind of how this all came to be. I do other training. I have a dog training business. So I do train other kinds of dogs, but this is kind of like my passion, you know. It's the kind of dog I like to work with. I like to see them go from absolutely terrified feral to a pet, you know, and these dogs may always be a little quirky, let's say, depending on what they went through. But in my experience, they can become quite happy pets in a, you know, somewhat quiet home. So yeah, I'm having another workshop April 18th and 19th and 20th in Las Vegas. So that'll be our fourth.
Oh, no, I know. Every time I showed up, there's always something going on in April. I'm like, oh, I'm so mad, but it's okay. I'm going to see Phyllis and you in August, so it's totally fine. Actually, just a little background for everybody, you know. Like I think, like I met Julie at the ICP conference. I think it was which one was it? Colorado or was it Missouri?
No, I met you before that. I don't remember how many years ago it was though.
I think in Missouri. I think it might have been.
Was it St. Louis? I don't
St.
know.
Louis, yeah, it was St. Louis. I all I remember was like you telling me like, hey, do you want to watch Phyllis work with a dog? And I said, okay, and I just went, and then I just went up, and then it was like working with Valerie's dog with her Great Dane, and then you know, she's saying all these phrases
like, I like him.
You're just like just a certain phrase like no stuffy, no fluffies, and I'm just like this, and Julie's just on the corner just laughing as I write. I'm just like, this is good stuff. So definitely I'm excited to work with Phyllis. Nelson is always really cool to learn from, and like just I need to work on making time to either do his program or the in-person workshops. So
yeah,
all the goals right there.
And I'll do a little pitch for Nelson. So I think it was a St. Louis workshop. He gave a talk about something.
Intentions. I think like shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. I think that was the that was the title. It was like if you want to train your dog or you want to talk to your dog, shut your mouth or something.
Shut your mouth. Yeah. And a lot of the stuff he said really. So the people I've learned from kind of all mesh together, you know, and like Jason Vasconi, Heather Beck, Nelson, and Phyllis, a lot of their techniques kind of blend together well, which has helped me not get too, let's say, confused. I think if you learn from a lot of trainers that are a lot different, not that it's bad, but then you can get confused for a while, right? Of having to meld very different things together. But I've been very lucky to find all these people. You know, I really feel like finding Phyllis, Nelson, Heather, and the whole IACP group, right? I mean, there's much more people that we know that are just awesome people to hang out with and learn from. You know, it's really important to have that group, and it allows you to grow as a trainer and always kind of be curious, you know. But Nelson is so important. What he's teaching is so important to me because he teaches you how to connect with a dog in a very, I don't want to, maybe primal way. And yeah, you might look silly doing some of the stuff he says. At first I was like, does this really work? I was really skeptical, but it does. And, I've made a lot of headway with dogs that were really difficult using his techniques. And it's mostly with fearful dogs, but I've learned a lot about how to connect with all dogs, learning about fearful dogs. And I think sometimes as trainers and also like general public, we try to make dog training more complicated than it has to be. And Nelson's message is somewhat simple, but it's not easy. So it's actually really hard to learn about yourself and center yourself and really pay attention to what that dog is telling you. That takes a lot of concentration. But at the end of the day, it's rather simple. And especially like with the fearful dogs, they're not gonna work with food, toys. They don't want to be near you. They want to be 20 feet away, hiding in a corner, and they've never walked on a leash in their life. So trying a lot of the normal, let's say normal, techniques, they're not going to work with these dogs. So that's why I like learning from Nelson so much with these guys, because it's really helped my overall understanding of dogs. So anyway, there's Nelson's little plug. So if you guys have a chance to take his courses, do it. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, Nelson's awesome. Like just watching his presentations on IACP conference is always nice, and it just brings you back to like a more like like primal or natural, just being with a dog. I think it's really important because, granted, I may be the 28-year-old trainer that's just been learning from all over the place, from Heather, Jason, and then now going into a little bit of the working dog world, and I don't even have much of a working dog, so it's more my hunger for knowledge, so but it's I always go back to more like Nelson and like the more natural way to work with dogs, especially the fearful ones. It's they don't need complicated, they need simple and approach. I'm just reading the comments. I got Hannah, she said hi. Hi Jacqueline, and then yes, I know Jason, I need to get to that workshop. It's on my list.
Jason's like our number one promoter. So funny.
Always. If you want to help your dog shut up. Yeah, that was the title. And
well, and I will say, like, I have learned a ton. Like, I had a foster dog that loved agility, and so I took agility courses with her, and I learned a ton in agility courses, which is not like my normal go-to sort of about how to use my body to direct dogs and stuff. So, I don't want to say like don't reach out into these different realms at all. I'd love to do a working dog thing because I don't know much about it at all. So yeah, take those things and then meld it into like who you are, I think, which is a good thing. And of course, I'm old, so I've gotten to know myself for longer than some people.
Right. I know. It was like just at this point, me being almost 30, and then just by the time I'm like 60, I'll probably work with like I probably would have worked with everybody by then.
Well, yeah. Well, and it takes years and years to master anything, not just dogs, right? What is it? The 10,000 hours. So I think people also need, for me, working with dogs, it sounds really goofy, right? But it's like a lifelong journey. And it's made me more patient. It's made me more open to things. It's made me calmer because I had to be all these things to help the dogs, which is funny because I didn't do that for people in my life. It was just easier for me to do it with a dog because when I work with the dogs, it's just me and the dog. and it helped me learn how to kind of just go in that zone. You know what I'm talking about, the zone
Hmm.
when you're
Yep.
like really connecting and stuff. And so, I mean, I think working with dogs can help people in many ways. And I've seen it with my clients too. They start to get more confident and things like that by working with their dog, which is awesome.
Yeah, no, I feel like when working with fearful dogs, it helped me be a lot more patient about it versus just like wanting like an instant outcome. And I also, like I find it very satisfying, like you being able to build the trust, or like going from letting that dog be like across the room from you, and then slowly just come closer, and then all of a sudden, it sits on your lap, like just like licking your face and things like that, and it's just nice. It's just one of those things where it's like I feel like when you work, and you could stop me or correct me anytime, but I feel like with the fearful dogs, there's not really much of a clock. It's just about like, just you being in tune with the dog, and just building that trust, kind of like the first dog, the wolf and the caveman kind of thing, and then just no, there's no intent, there's no clock about it. It just you just keep doing it, and then you start seeing that happy-go-lucky dog later on, but you kind of have to like work work and earn it, versus just like
Mhm.
just get your average lab, and then just be like
Right,
it's
right.
it's it's like it's like instantly happy, but yeah, that's why I wanted to have this talk, because like I have Compassion Without Borders, that rescue
Right.
that you came over to help teach the volunteers and things, and then we have like people getting dogs from like Taiwan, Korea, dogs from the reservations, or even just at that point, somebody with a Craigslist dog that adopted or that took the puppy, and they're like not socialized properly, or they have like really soft or fearful temperaments, that
Mm.
people want like a normal lifestyle. People like say, oh, I want to take my dogs everywhere with me. I want my dog to be okay with all these people. I want my dog okay with kids, or I want my dog to not be afraid of sounds or the traffic cone across the street or something like that. And I think like right now, it's between like reactive dogs, which reactivity can stem from fear, and like it's between like either overexcitement or reactive in some sort of aggression. Like I rarely have real aggression cases, but like most of the time it's like fear or
Mhm.
fear aggression, so, and especially with people listening in that have like dogs from a different country or like a reservation, I think it's good to talk about, because it's good to just elaborate on things like this, and how we can help the dogs, how we can help build the trust, because it's like I see how people can struggle with it at first, but then when they get the idea, when they understand, then it's like, okay, now
Yeah.
it's more like be more accommodating, versus like everyone's like, oh, was that me? I was like,
Right.
I just heard I just heard a ding. I was like, what happened?
Stuff.
Uh, but yeah, no, it's Fearful Dogs definitely just has his own. It's definitely it's definitely good to just learn and understand how to work with them, because it really helps your patients. You're not really worried about time. You just go back to that natural state, and we're getting more and more every time. Like we're getting more dogs, because we're always like trying to save dogs, and
Mhm.
as passionate as people are, there's kind of like people that want normal dogs, or they feel sorry and they take the dogs home,
Yeah.
which you can go ahead. Yeah, I know you have some thoughts.
Well, yeah, quite a few thoughts. I mean, the dogs that I work with are already in the shelters. Let me just say, I don't go out and trap dogs from the reservations and things. I have some mixed feelings about that because we have a finite number of people who are willing to help dogs like this, right? So all the rescue groups bringing in feral dogs from Puerto Rico or wherever they might be, Mexico, they bring them in and then they don't know how to help them. If you're going to bring in these dogs, you need to know how to help them, and drugging them is not rehab. So I see a lot of rescues that they're just like, well, let's just give the dog a ton of trazodone. First of all, it's not necessary if you can learn how to help them. I have, in all the dogs I work with, I have not drugged any of these dogs, except I will say when I take some of them to a vet. Hawkeye, for example, who a lot of people probably know, the vet and I just decided, he's gone to the vet, he can get vaccines and things, but he needed blood drawn, he needed a dental, he needed stuff like that. So I gave him some trazodone, and he was a big goofy dog going in there, and in that case, it's easier for the dog, it's easier for the vet staff and me, right? And he was fine, he did fine. But I don't drug these dogs initially to work with them. So that's one little, soapbox thing. Like, if you don't know how to work with these dogs and you can't help them before you get them adopted to someone else, either learn how to help them or stop rescuing them. There's lots of dogs who aren't fearful, feral, severe cases that need help. I come to New Mexico. We have a ton of nice dogs that would make great family pets, that don't require a ton of rehab. The reason I got into this was because there are these dogs here. But yes, so the trust, did you leave?
No, sorry about that. Like, the lighting is getting darker, and so I wanted to fix the lighting as you talk. So sorry about that.
And as for the time frame, I think that's one thing that really helped me with fostering these dogs, is that I did not have a client paying me for 3 weeks, and I felt the pressure to deliver in 3 weeks' time. You know what I mean? There's a lot of pressure working for a client that I didn't have when I was fostering these dogs, or if they're in the shelter. There's not as much pressure to have a time frame. And you can only do so much. The dog also has to decide to cooperate with you. You can help the dog decide to cooperate or not, but a lot of that depends on the individual dog. For example, I have Tipton and Hawkeye, right? Tipton was a feral street dog from Las Vegas, New Mexico. He was born a stray, and they caught him as a stray. He was way worse when I started working with him, as far as shutting down and like panicking on a leash and that sort of thing. And then I have Hawkeye, who was in a hoarding case, knew how to walk on a leash, but I'm not sure what happened there, but it wasn't good stuff, right? Like, all the dogs from there had some behaviors from either being kept in a cage for years and years. And if you think about it, feral dogs are out exploring the world, right? So they're at least used to, normal things like cars and people walking by and things like that. Whereas being kept in a cage, I find, is actually more damaging. And so the point of this is that Tipton is actually much more normal in many, many ways after 2 years than Hawkeye is after 3 years. With me and in our household, they're both normal dogs. They go on walks, they play, they do all these normal things. But if I take Hawkeye out to a new place and Tipton, they're just different, right? So if you have a fearful feral dog, just recognize they're all individuals. And even, I know, like from the beagle case, right? The 4,000 beagles from the labs. I know one beagle who is progressing slower than another beagle. And that could
Mhm.
be for any number of things. Maybe that beagle was there longer. They had different things done to them. Maybe one beagle was socialized better with people. Like, you just don't know why. But don't compare your dog to the other person's dog, right? Because they're not the same dog. But yeah, the timelines, like normally in 3 to 4 sessions, I can get them walking on a leash where we can go for an actual walk in a field and they behave fairly normally and they'll follow me and climb on rocks and things like that. But as far as living in a house and becoming, more of a normal pet where they're not going to run away and things, that takes about 3 months. And I have a very structured way of doing this. But then to become normal with my husband, visitors, things like that, that takes a lot longer. And of course, during COVID, no one had visitors, right? So all the dogs
Mhm.
kind of got used to just me and my husband, and then strangers come and they're like, oh. But for example, Tipton knows when he goes to these workshops in Las Vegas, he's now learned that if he goes around and visits everyone, he gets petted and he gets some of their lunch. Right. So
Yep.
So, like, will he jump in the car with them and trust them and be normal with them elsewhere? No, but he's very happy to, manipulate them for his purposes while they're there. Um, so yeah, all those time frames are gonna vary, and the dogs continue to improve their entire lives. Um, I mean, Hawkeye, it took him 2.5 years to want a belly rub. On the day he actually was kind of like, oh, I'm gonna, he kind of asked for a belly rub. I was like, oh my gosh, buddy. And for him, that's a huge amount of trust. If you think about it, for a dog to roll over and give you his belly and you're standing over him, it's a lot of trust. But yeah, and you mentioned trust, which is a huge thing.
Mhm. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, it's just you kind of definitely hit it home when it comes to like every dog's like a certain individual is an individual on their own, and I know lots of people that their dog passed away, then they get another dog, and they're like do the whole my old dog did this, my old dog did that, and then I'm like, well, I don't want to burst your bubble, but I'm gonna have to because this is not your dog from 15 years ago. This is the dog we're working with now. And
Yeah.
then I feel like with most rescue cases or things like that, people always want to talk about like, oh, he had like a rough past, or he was a or like when the dogs are fearful, things like that, some people assume like there was some sort of abuse involved
Hmm.
and things. And then for me, it's like just me from learning, me being like a Caesar Milan boy for for like the first few years of my life, is more just like I don't want to be hung up. I don't want the story to explain the dog. It's like I want like I do want to know a little bit of what happened in the past. If I don't know, it's not a problem. I just tell people, hey, that happened years ago, but I want to work on the dog we have now, because whatever happened years ago happened already. So there's no way to change it, but it's just being able to focus on the dog we have in front of us and figuring out the best plan when it comes to working with fearful dogs, because um yeah, it just takes so much time, and I feel like people are so not as patient, I feel, when it comes to
Well,
like if like well, if like your foster, like with you and your fosters, or like people that have dogs like that in the past, I think are well more equipped. But if it was like, I don't know, some average family that wanted like a golden retriever,
right,
and then
right.
they have that kind of dog, just kind of the kind of comparison.
Well, and it doesn't, yes, it takes a long time in some respects, but then in others, you can see progress very quickly with these dogs. So I think
Yeah.
once you get the trust of that dog, which could take 3 minutes, it could take 3 days, it could take 3 weeks. And of course, trust, it's like when we first met, right? We're not going to trust each other entirely in that first moment. We got to get to know each other, right? Like, is Kevin gonna, say like,
Mhm.
"Oh, come with me," and I don't know, throw me off a cliff, or is he gonna, take me out to dinner? I mean, you don't know, and so for people to expect dogs to trust them right away really is kind of unrealistic, especially when they're fearful, feral spectrum. Um,
Mhm.
So, and you mentioned that they make you work for it, which is true, right? It's almost it brings me a sense of greater satisfaction because I know I really had to earn that trust with that dog. But honestly, I can get of course, I say this and then I'm going to get one who totally goes against this rule. About 2 weeks, these dogs are functioning fairly normally in my house, so I don't need a leash on them to get them in and out of the crate or in and out of the house and that sort of thing. But I
Mhm.
concentrate on very small things first, which is, and I am very careful how I approach the dog, which is key, right? I think a lot of people right away mess up. And this
Yep.
is with approaching all kinds of dogs, whether they're, trainers, owners, whatever. We try to make friends with them too quickly. And if you watch, I've had a pack of 4 to 5 dogs for more time than my husband would like. But, uh, I watch them. And the more dominant the dog is in the hierarchy, the less they're going to really make friends with the newcomer.
Mhm.
And but they're not aggressive towards the new dog, and they acknowledge it's there, but they're not going to play, they're not going to go up and pet it. I mean, dogs don't pet each other anyway. They just kind of give the new dog space, and they might lead by example. So Chardonnay will start like sniffing around the yard when a new yard dog comes in, and that dog will automatically just follow her around the yard. Right there, she's just built trust and she's done, in our eyes, nothing, right? But in the dog's eyes, she's actually leading them around the yard. Um, so just approaching them that way instead of wanting what I want from the relationship, which for most people is, affection and dog kind of following you around aimlessly and things like that. Um, I think expecting that right away is it's a lot of pressure on a dog, you
Yeah.
know? So we need to just give them time to chill out and relax and observe us and see if we're trustworthy, and then we start to challenge them.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of people that work with fearful dogs are afraid to challenge the dog. Maybe they feel sorry for it. Maybe they're afraid they're going to hurt it. Maybe they're afraid they're going to scare it more. Because if you read a lot of stuff online, it says that if you stress out a dog too much, it's going to turn aggressive or, become fearful of you or all kinds of nonsense. And I actually have looked up what other institutions say about fearful dogs, and I disagree with a lot of it. Yes, of
Mhm.
course, if I push that dog over the edge, yes, of course, that's going to happen. But our job as professionals is to know, just like with kids, right? If you have a kid that's afraid of something or learning how to ride a bike, you have to push them to ride a bike. Because yeah, they're going to fall, they're going to get hurt, but at the end of the day they'll actually achieve something and have greater confidence in themselves, and maybe the two of you also have a deeper bond because you helped them through that. So that's kind of how I look at working with dogs. The other thing I see a lot is people are afraid to make the dog walk on a leash. And I do say make because a lot of the dogs I work with have never had a leash on. And yes, they will be very dramatic about it. Um, or a lot of fearful dogs put on the brakes, right? They're like, no, I'm not walking. every dog has its different tactics, and they'll try, the alligator rolling, the brakes, they'll try biting the leash, they try all kinds of things to get out of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But we know as humans, it's a human dominated world. And to have a life, they have to walk on a leash. And you can't do much with a fearful dog until that dog can walk on a leash. So I actually have 2 online courses. And the first one is just getting the dog to walk on a leash. And I started with that because you have to teach the dog that before you can ask them to come in and out of their crate, to follow you in and out of your house and the yard. Any of these things involve using a leash. And I think a lot of people bring a fearful dog in the house and they just let it hide in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
they don't ask it to come with them to do all these great things, that dogs love to do. So, and also exercise is a huge component to rehabbing a dog. There's tons of experiments and statistics about exercise on dogs, but mostly on people, right? So all the good endorphins and things that get moving because we exercise. And that goes for the dogs too. If you take a fearful dog that's been hiding in a corner of a house or in a shelter and you take it for a walk, every single time I've done that, the shelter staff will be like, he was so much better. He's now sitting up in his run instead of hiding in the corner. Or he's actually looking around and acting a little more curious. And I think there's some connection between just getting all those chemicals in the body changing from being fearful to moving. And so that would be another big thing, is to just get that dog moving.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost, if it's a little stressful for them, it almost seems like they get kind of that stress out. You know how when you're stressed out and you like go to the gym and really work out, you feel better?
Mm-hmm. I me starting out working out this week, definitely
Saw that. That's why I said.
definitely hit it home right there. And
I saw you were
it
going back to the gym. I
it's
mean,
been it was 6 years since I've been to the gym, and then here I am. And it felt it it releases like the good feeling hormones, and then like granted I was sore for maybe like 3
right?
days ago, but it gave me like and I think this also points out to the dogs, it gave like a good sense of purpose. It gave like a good way to like redirect the attention to something else, like you're focused on
Mhm.
something else versus like, oh my god, the world's scary, and
Right.
I should like it just gives you a break from like, I don't know, from reality, or give you like you're in your own space that you feel
Mhm.
comfortable in. And I'm trying to I had a bubble, but then the whole gym thing made me like tip my cup a little bit, so I'm
Mhm.
like,
Yeah, I mean, activity is important for us and way more important for dogs.
mhm,
And the other thing that's super important for them is using their nose, which so using a nose is so important to a dog, yet so much of our training focuses on them using their eyes and their ears. And I'm not quite sure, and I'm talking rehab cases here. I'm not talking like obedience training, and I'm not against obedience training. It's awesome. But you can't start there with a rehab case, in my opinion. Um, a lot of dogs that need rehab aren't using their nose. They're using their eyes, and they might be, like you say, fear aggressive, right? Or even just reactive. Like I had a cattle dog years ago as a client, and man, this dog would just boom, right? React like out of nowhere. He was so amped on adrenaline, and this dog was getting a lot of exercise and excitement from his owner. And oh, the screen changed. Are you still there? I don't know if I should keep talking. I'll keep talking. I don't know where Kevin went. Anyway, but I had this client who had a cattle dog, and he was extremely reactive, but he would never use his nose. Ah, there you are. You're back. I was like, should I keep
Yeah,
talking?
the we had a short the heater had a short fuse, and I was just like, holy crap of all the times. But I'm on my hotspot, so I am so glad it didn't. I'm so glad it continued as you're talking.
It
So
did. It did. But
so sorry, sorry
no
for
worries.
sorry for the
We'll stop
interruption, Julie.
talking.
This
I
is
was
not
like,
usually happen. So
we'll just keep talking. We don't want dead air.
yeah,
But
but
but a lot of dogs that are reactive, right? They don't use their nose. And a lot of fearful dogs also don't use their nose. So a lot of what
mhm,
I work on initially is to try and get that dog to use its nose more, because that's how they take in information accurately. I mean, I
mhm.
watch my dogs out in the yard, and they'll just all sit there and like sniff the breeze. And if one starts sniffing the breeze, the others will all start sniffing the breeze in the same direction. And they don't have to say anything to each other. And as humans, of course, that's not what we do. We look at stuff.
So okay, we're good. Okay, we're good.
So with fearful dogs, it's really
So
important,
bad.
yeah, to start getting the dog to use its nose. I had a case of blind pit bull, and this fabulous client. I mean, this lady was amazing. The dog was trying to use its eyes. It had no eyes. It was still trying to see. So we spent 2 months literally just working on recall and I was trying to get that dog to be a dog. And that sounds like a long time, but if you think about it, once you make that breakthrough with the dog, the whole rest of the training is going to be super easy. Well, I won't say super easy, but easier, right? So we got that dog using his nose, and then he very quickly fell in line with being able to do some obedience in that situation and stop reacting. And so now the owner will actually sit with them and sniff with them and be like, "What do you smell?" You know? And instead of reacting, he sniffs. A lot of our training actually prevents dogs from using their nose because we make them heel. And if they're walking on a short lead, they can't really go and check out their environment. Now, I'm not saying to just let your dog run willy nilly whenever, but if you're doing a rehab case, I find using a longer line and letting the dog investigate and doing it with them. That's the key part. A lot of my clients will go, "Well, he sniffs the bush." It's like, yeah, but you're not doing it with them. So you're still irrelevant to the dog. The dog's basically acting on its own, like you're not even there, except that you're holding the leash. So I like to become like a partner with the dog. Um, so that's to me the biggest things in earning trust. And then once you're in the trust, you just build on it. So
Yeah, no, I I caught no, I 100% agree with all of that. Even though like the first minute I totally was cut off, I was like, "Oh crap, this is how it ends." Um, but yeah, no, I think it's really important that you know, especially with dogs like fearful dogs or just any dog, they get the exercise, they have some sort of purpose or something where they're able to explore the world, because like especially and me learning from you and like Nelson, like I know with some of the dogs you worked with, you've actually put them on long lines, like like you let them just go and explore the world, sniff the grass and things like that, and just not really have like a thing like walk like be in a heel or walk like next to me right away. It's just like just enjoy the world first, explore the world, and then we'll get to the walking next to me or just being with me later on.
yeah,
Even like go- going to go sniff a tree with them or sniff a book, like just makes it feel like that you're also interested with what the dogs are interested too. I mean, there have been times where maybe I've marked a tree with them as well, depending on in a hike or something, where if you gotta go, you gotta go, and the dogs are like, "Oh, cool, you pee on trees
Yeah,
too,"
yeah,
and makes it
right?
makes
I
it
know.
more makes it more makes it more relatable. Um, and
When I'm thinking of that dog at the workshop in Santa Rosa,
mhm,
I don't remember the dog's name, but he was kind of barking at you through the when you would come in the gate,
mhm,
and then he was with the owner on a 6-foot leash when he was doing that, and then we
mhm,
put him on the long line, and you remember he didn't bark, he went and sniffed some stuff,
mhm,
and so, yeah, you can't walk a dog around on the long line all the time, but that's a step to the end goal, which is to be able to walk on a regular leash and not react.
mhm,
So, it was I wish I had that on video because it was so cool, and it's also separating the dog from the owner. Like, sometimes the owners can be a source of, let's say, like, possession or protection, and so the long line helps the dog get away, and you can see what the dog's natural inclination really is on its own. And this is for more like fear aggressive dogs that are already in a home. I'll do this. Because usually dogs want to avoid conflict
mhm.
if they're given the opportunity, usually. My dog Annie did not. She wanted it big time.
Yep.
And she wasn't afraid of anything, which in that case, those dogs are almost easier now because you don't have to work on the fear and the reactivity part. If you have fear aggression, it's kind of this balancing act between building confidence that the dog has, that the owner's going to actually protect them and not put them in harm's way. But then on the flip side, I will tell a dog like that to stop reacting when they're going forward.
Mhm,
So even dogs that are reacting out of lack of leadership or fear, let's say, as the base, you'll watch their tail. And if they're afraid and then all of a sudden that tail goes whoop up, that's usually when they're going to start reacting. And I'll be like, hey, no, we're not going to do that. Let's go sniff this tree or let's go do something
mhm,
else. And so then
mhm.
you start working with them and just getting the dog to follow the owner, is really all you really need to do. But again, it sounds simple, but it's not easy because a lot of people are, and this is what working with dogs has done for me. It's made me more confident to be in the lead and direct, and before I just had no clue how to do that, right? And I think a lot of people are probably that way. They're not real comfortable with leading, especially their dogs, because all this fur baby stuff and right, like, but dogs do, if you lead, they will follow. So if they're not
Mhm.
following you, that means you're not leading. So I
Yeah.
always, if my dogs are acting like, you know, acting up one day, I'm like, what is going on? What am I doing that's not clear to them? And you kind of have to problem
Yep.
solve.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and yeah, and definitely agree with that. I feel like, when people go out with their dogs and they're reactive or they're fearful, I feel like, they're like the dog obviously will love you, or like the dog will just, you know, I don't I say like I mean, especially when there's certain incidents where, the dog doesn't trust the owners to keep them safe, and then they feel like they have to do the behavior themselves to make whatever is threatening them to go away, whether it's a dog, whether it's a person or the mailman. I feel that I tell owners all the time is, like, if you can give your dog reassurance, if you can give your dog reassurance that you can keep them safe, then I feel that your dog won't have to react as
mhm,
intense or react as bad. And then, just finding like an alternative behavior, or creating a little bit more space with the trigger, and you telling the dog, hey, follow me here, and you'll be okay from that, I think is a big thing people don't catch on sometimes. And I mean, just like me also watching Jason Cohen just like doing, always talking, preaching about advocate for your dog, and whether like if a person tries to reach to pet your dog, just cutting in between the person and the other dog and your dog go, nope, he's in training, or like just
Yeah,
being able to watch have your dog watch that you can take care of the situation instead of them having to deal with it. Um, even just like even just carrying something to ward off like an off leash dog, or just like something where it's like what to do in that sense, because like once something traumatic happens, then you don't get as much trust when they're outside with you. Sometimes I feel like like especially like you had like you had a little incident like
I
few
did.
few weeks ago with like a couple of cane corsos running
Yes.
around you and your dogs, and it was like I can imagine it was traumatic for both people and dogs. So um
That's why I moved.
it's that's why you moved. is
That
why
was
is
like
why I would have done the same thing.
the last. Well, I just got tired of walking around my neighborhood feeling like I had to have an arsenal around my waist and be alert all the time. Um, Not that I'm not always aware of what's going on, but it was ridiculous, right? And I will say, like after that, and they were large dogs. There were three of them. Luckily, they weren't super aggressive, or I probably wouldn't be here just talking to you.
Hmm.
Um, and my dog Shiloh and Tipton were with me. And, of course, my main concern was keeping them behind me and getting the dogs to go away. Um, but, it's harder said than done when there's three of them. And luckily, the owner came and called them and they went with her, which was amazing. And there were two people on the street with motorcycles. And I'm like, run them over, run them over. Or at least like like drive the motorcycle, whatever. But they were revving the engines, and I think that helped. But I mean, afterwards I was scared, but during that time I've been on a couple I've had a couple things happen to me where stuff like that happens, and the people just start screaming at the top of their lungs. They start panicking, right? Which I think that probably scares their dog more than anything. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, later I kind of went, wow, when I got home and I was safe, I kind of freaked out. Wow, that was close and all kinds of things. But at the time I was just focused on, you know, protecting my dogs, basically. Um, and I will say after that, Tipton was more anxious on walks for a few days, especially if we went in that spot. He definitely was like looking around. I'm like, I got it, buddy. I got my bear
Hmm.
spray now. I'm okay. um, so yeah, I mean, it's hard to overcome stuff like that
Oh
mentally, but
yeah.
you have to do it. And there's no sense in living in it either.
Hmm.
It doesn't do you any good to like sit around and worry about what happened in the past. So,
Yeah, yeah, and especially like sometimes I feel like when I see people react before their dog reacts, like I feel like like I see them already clenching up or like holding the leashes, and I'm just like, I know you're reacting to the dog because your dog looking at that dog is gonna create the lunging and the barking, but then your dog doesn't think of it that way. Your dog thinks of it like you're you're acting weird because there's that dog over there, and then the dog's
yeah,
like, oh, I gotta keep you safe. You're not in a stable state of mind, or you're not like
yes, that's a
you're
good
not
word.
yeah, like you're not able to help me out in this situation, so I gotta take care of it myself. And then it's what the more I tell people about that, they go, oh, okay. Then I also tell people to breathe, because
Mhm.
people forget to breathe when they're in stressful situations. Sometimes me too. Um, but yeah, Yeah, it's just, I know with some case, I know with like when it comes to like fearful dogs, it's important to have the structure. It's important to know like it's important for them to have clarity so then when something happens, they know, okay, when this happens, my owner will do this, this, and this, or she'll tell me to
Mhm.
do could go sniff this and not worry about it, right? It's kind of like I tell people, it's like I compare it to like, okay, when you're on vacation, you're going to a boat trip. Are you gonna go with the captain that only had his license for 1 year, doesn't know the waters, or are you gonna feel better going to like this guy that done this for 30 years and knows all the routes and knows where to take you, right? Like it's important that you know what you're doing and um you you feel confident with the decisions you make and you have the picture in mind. And
Yeah.
once the dog knows the picture, then the dog knows, okay, you got this, instead of
Yeah.
me taking care of this. um it just hits home. It just like it like me coming up with all these analogies is literally like people just understand it in human analogy. Like you would
Yeah.
go for the more experienced pilot versus the 1 year pilot, and then they go, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. Well, and Phyllis has this, and I'm not going to quite relay it properly, but she has this analogy about, you're on a boat and it's sinking and there's lifeboats. Which lifeboat would you rather go in? The one with a guy or a lady that knows what they're doing and they're like, come on in here. We have this plan. We're going to do this course of action. Or the one where the people are like, oh my God, we're going to die. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You'd probably choose the other one. Of course, as humans, we make some really bad choices. We don't go with our instinct. And I tell my clients too, like when they're in that situation, like maybe a barking dog's coming towards them or whatever, I'm like, just make a decision and do it. It's more the decisiveness the dog will follow. I said, even if it's the wrong decision, just do something with
Mm-hmm.
with confidence. And then later, of course, we always go back and go, well, maybe this would have been better at that time, or I didn't do that quite so right. We can reflect on it and change next time. But sometimes just making a decision is the problem. They'll just stand there terrified. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I once had a lesson where there was two dogs kind of fighting in the home, and they actually got in a fight while I was there, and the owners just stood there and watched them, and they didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And the one lady was just like, "Oh my God, they're fighting." I'm like, "Well, that's not helping." I actually went in and separated them, and I'm like, "What would you guys do if I wasn't here? Just watch, just continue to watch them." I think paralyzed people get a little paralyzed, with fear. Or they're not sure what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Just like dogs, right? We can fight, flight, freeze. A lot of people choose freeze. Um, so it takes a lot of practice. We have a lot of practice doing this as dog training professionals. Um, so for the average pet owner to gain the amount of practice it takes, I mean, my clients I work with, for a couple months, they get there if they do the homework, of
Mm-hmm.
just making good choices and learning, oh, if this happens, I do this. If the other thing happens, I do this. And they can just do it. It becomes more automatic. Um, but
Yeah.
it does happen. You just have to practice it. And with pet owners, you only have to learn it with your dogs. So we have to learn it
Yep.
with we have to learn it how to deal with lots of dogs, different personalities. But um, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
No. Yeah.
it made me a better parent.
It
That's for
it
sure.
definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, definitely, it's just like when you know you find like you have to have like a good game plan when it comes to like that individual, the dog. And then like I don't know if while I was in my whole Wi-Fi mix up, if we talked about how to approach a dog, but it's just approach the dog, and then it's just like, like going back to when you were talking about using, like pushing the dog a little bit, having them like use a little bit of pressure to get them to walk, or like, overcome a certain obstacle. It's so important because otherwise, we don't make progress. And like
Mm-hmm.
like me coaching a person, coaching somebody through discomfort, and then you make it on the other side, and you both feel good. And
Yeah.
um just from a little bit of leash pressure, a little bit of just like, well, I know Nelson doesn't like pressure because it represents something else
Tension.
to him, but tension, just like a little bit of tension, a little bit of stress, and you go overcome it, like it just makes you feel more confident, right? Like even with like when you were like working with dogs on like agility equipment, you don't have to be like competing or competitive, but it's just like climbing little obstacles, like to help overcome that mental state of I can't do it. Or like I think maybe you talked to me about it, where like walking over cardboard boxes, or
Yeah.
like sounds, like desensitizing sound, or even just like training your dog while there's the loud sounds going on at a low volume, recordings of just like sounds, you know depending what your dog does, you just focus on doing those things a couple of times, build some resilience, and then they're never going to be, the sensitivity is never going to change, but you can just work on how they deal with it or cope with it, would you say? Just how they handle it is important. So there's definitely a lot to it that's just important when it comes to working with sensitive dogs like that. Like fearful, like when you approach a dog, right? Like after watching Nelson, after watching you, Julie, it's like, everyone always wants to put their hand out like this, like smell my hand, or they just want to like go in their face towards the dog when I go, no, and they watch me, and I'm just turning my back to them, or I approach the side, because right, it's like we don't have eyes behind our backs or behind our heads, so it's like more, it's less confrontational, and then people start seeing that the dog comes up like slowly versus just like me facing them.
Yeah. Because
And I think yeah, sorry, go ahead.
what they really want to do is to smell you.
Hmm.
They don't want to be touched necessarily. And it's amazing how quickly even feral or fearful dogs will try to smell you, which is again their way of gaining information if you just allow it and don't try to interfere too much. Um, but I mean, even with other dogs, right? Like if let's just say, and I watched Phyllis train dogs for a long time. So when she came in my house and I had Annie and Coltrane, and Annie had tried to bite some guest, naughty. Um, but Phyllis walked in that house like a force to be reckoned with. You know what I mean? Like she didn't squat down and be like, "Oh, Annie, you're so cute." Nah, 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 nah. And so, but she didn't even touch the dogs, right? It was just her demeanor of, I'm here, I'm in charge. And so I think with fearful dogs, you don't want to have that
Hold on,
intensity.
hold on.
Do we have technological issues?
There we go. For some
We
reason, you
good?
were breaking up. That's why I was like, I had to
Uh,
like just do a quick pause and just figure it out.
okay,
You good?
cool.
Okay, you're good. You're good. So
All right.
anyway, continue your story.
Yeah, so she comes in like a force to be reckoned with. And, my dogs respected her right away, which is what those dogs needed. With a fearful dog, I'm not going to come in with that kind of energy, right? Like, and that's why I'm better with fearful dogs. I have to work on like projecting that kind of energy. But I still come in with a soft, let's say soft leadership kind of mindset. Um, but if you come in and you bend down and you try and pet the dog and all of that, you've just lowered yourself in pack status below that dog. And if you're trying to train the dog or what, fearful dog, aggressive dog, whatever you're working with, now you have to work against what you just told the dog you are. Occasionally I'll come in and the dog's like super friendly and they just need to work on like, I don't know, something. But that doesn't happen very often. Usually it's kind of big problems. But I just come in and I stand there, I let the dog just sniff me, and we sit down and I talk to the owner for a while and just let the dog kind of figure me out. Jessica. So I think that's important at adoption events and things. When I work with a lot of dogs, I try to get to know them first. And I'm just kind of neutral with them, and then as you're with the dog and they earn some of that affection and like playing and softer body language, then I'll give it to the dog. But again, I've learned that from watching my dogs, right? If a new dog comes in, they pretty much, the ones that I've chosen to be, kind of in charge, or kept for that reason, they'll kind of go up, make their little statement, and then they let the dog be. And it can be 3 or 4 days at the shortest time before they start to play or like socialize with that dog. If the dog is more unstable, let's say has some anxiety or fear or anything like that, it'll take them longer before they start to play with that dog.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that I don't go there with them. I do, but I have to set that relationship first. And for me, that's the way dogs are. I know there's a story about wolves in Yellowstone, and one wolf leaves a wolf pack and joins the other one, and how that dog had to hang out on the outskirts for quite some time before he was accepted. So are we actually putting too much pressure on the dogs by bringing them in the pack too quickly? Are we working against nature, actually doing that to the dog and confusing them? Because if it was just dogs, that wouldn't happen, and kind of where I live, I get to see like free roaming dogs, which is things a lot of people don't get to see because in most of America, it doesn't happen that much. But it's very fascinating to watch them. They just like trotting down the street, like minding their own business. They don't stop and say hi to everyone. They just keep going on their mission.
Mm-hmm.
So
No, I agree. I think with most dogs and people, it's just like just teaching them how to be okay with the presence of other dogs and people and not having to go sniff and say hi and just be like, okay, cool, there's a person right there. Oh, cool, there's a dog across the street, and keep moving on.
Yeah, that's how the fear aggression part develops, right? Because someone who has a fearful dog, they need to meet every person to get used to people. No, they need to learn that they are safe with you. And usually what I do is I give my dogs a choice whether they want to say hello or not. And I explain to the person maybe I meet on the street that I'm talking to that, tipped in shy of new people, and could they just stand there, and he might come over and sniff him, he might not, it depends. And if they just stand there, he will actually go over and sniff them quite quickly. But that's what he wants. He doesn't want to be petted by them. So I think if you have a fearful dog, that's how you advocate for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they actually become more comfortable with people, because they learn every person isn't going to like accost them on the street, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm not going to take him certain places. I just don't. He's fine in pet stores and things like that. I've taken him to outdoor restaurants when it's not busy, but I'm not going to take him to like a brewery, right? Like on a Friday night. It's just too much. So, know your dog and know what is reasonable for them too. So, but But I think a lot of people try these things too early. They don't get the dog's trust first. And like you were saying, like going over a cardboard box, there's a lot of dogs. I'll walk into the home and the person's like, oh, yeah, they trust me, but they won't actually walk on leash around the kitchen island with that person.
Hmm.
They're afraid of going in that small space with that person. So that tells me the dog doesn't trust them to lead them around the house, or the dog's being a little resistant. Either one, like, I don't want to do that right now. But either way, it's a signal to me that the relationship still needs more work before that person might go out and, try a bigger task. And it's kind of the stair stepping, it's like, okay, we do a little something together, we trust each other more, and then it kind of levels off and we kind of exist. And then we do a little something new, we trust each other more. So it's kind of this little give and take
Hmm.
with that. But, when I bring a fearful dog in the house, they're either in a crate or on a long line in my house. I find the 6-foot leash, the whole tethering the dog to me idea. First of all, I don't want a dog attached to me in the kitchen and when I'm cleaning and doing all that stuff. But I find a 6-foot leash is way too close
Hmm.
for the beginning stages. I'd rather, well, you can't see my room, but they're each off in their own little corner here. So if I have the dog on a long line, they can go lay on a bed across the room and watch me from there. But it's very structured, and I do let them like maybe lay in a corner. Tipton liked to get under my dining room table. That was his little safe space for a while. And I'll let them hang out there and watch me, and then I'll put them back in the crate for a while to rest. The other thing about feral dogs that's fun is that they get into stuff that normal dogs do not get into. So, like, Tipton, especially, he's super smart. He learned how to open the trash cans. He learned how to, uh, just he likes socks. He'll do things and investigate things in a way a dog living on the streets would in my house. They'll get pillows off the couch, like all kinds of things like that. So if I can't watch them, I put them in a crate so they don't know it's not allowed, right? They
Hmm.
don't know the kitchen table isn't okay to jump on. They just don't know these things. So they go in a crate so they don't develop bad habits at the same time. But that's the start of it. And I try to walk them as soon as possible. And it might just be a short walk in my neighborhood in a very quiet area. But I think that's an important part of the whole daily routine is, we get up, we go for a walk, we come home, we eat, we go out in the yard, then it's rest time. There's a very structured sort of way about it. And they love their routine. you
Yeah,
know?
and I think it's important too because like I've told people many times when you first adopt a dog, do not do anything for the next 2 or 3 weeks. Don't take them on like a beach. Don't take them to like the brewery right away. And like I said, there's a reason for this. Like you need to know
Yeah.
your dog, and the dog needs to know you. And then I get a call maybe 2 weeks later. How'd they do? Oh, we took him to the beach. How'd it go? Not that well. See
Yeah.
what happens when the dog trainer tell you something and you don't do it?
Oh, they ran away.
Yeah, and basically I tell them like, you got your dog needs a routine, your dog needs structure. Can't just stay at home all day, 8 to 5 job, and then expect to be good when you get back home. Like it's important that you provide some sort of fulfillment in your dog, like exercise physically, mentally, do some quality time with the dog. Even like I'll tell people, do scatter feeding, throw your dog's food around the house and let them go use their nose instead of like just eat from a bowl. Go just go sit in the park somewhere, let them be exposed to like all these different things. There's just it's definitely hard, like especially with our society. We bring dogs in our society and we expect them to be like decent or like pretty good, but then all cult all our culture always changes, depending. It's just like they have to be on leash all the time. and then it's just hard for some dogs to transition. And it's really important for the owners when they first get the dog to just keep it simple, figure out a game plan, and then not just go from 1 to 10. Oh, look, our dog did this. Oh, I don't know where that came from.
Right.
And I go, oh, I know where it came from. You went too fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Keeping it simple. I tell people, when you went to school, you didn't start writing novels right away. You had to learn how to make a letter, and then you had to learn how to write a sentence, and then a paragraph, and a book, or maybe a research paper. But there's all these little progressions, and as the dog progresses, they get more freedom, but it's important to make that habit in the dog, because then if you make it a routine and a habit, the dog will just do it because that's what they're used to doing. So, I mean, yeah, just because they're fearful doesn't mean they're not going to get into things, or that they're submissive. A lot of people think fearful dogs are submissive. Not necessarily. It depends, because once you bring that dog out of the fearful state, you might have a totally different dog. Which is why if I pull a fearful dog, I usually look for one that I feel wants to be with people instinctually, even if they're terrified. So, like Tipton, for example, first time I got him out and I took him in the play yard at the shelter, he right away, Jason was very guilty of giving him food at the workshop.
That's so funny. I was like, I read this comment. I'm like, this is a perfect time to bring that up. So,
but right away he wanted to participate. I made a routine around the play yard, and part of the routine was me just sitting down, and then he'd come up and sniff me. And right away he wanted to participate in that routine with me. And so I knew this was a dog that was very interested in being with people and participating, cooperating with them. So there's little signs you can look for, that gives you a better chance of working with a fearful dog who will become a good pet. If they're totally aloof and don't care about people, so a lot of feral dogs are not really afraid. They're just feral, which is different. They're wild. And, we've had some go through the shelter that really didn't want anything to do with people, even if after they weren't afraid anymore. They really weren't interested. They'd be fine hanging out with their dog friends. That kind of dog is going to take a little more of a specialized owner as well. So it's important to know, like, not all fearful dogs are the same. And at the workshop we do with Nelson, you can really see that, because he might work with like 5 or 6 in a row throughout the day. And most of them like to stay along the edges of things. They feel safer there. But then we had one that didn't want to do that. He wanted to kind of jog across the middle of spaces. So it's like, what does that dog that you have really like to do? And figuring that out. Like Tipton loved to climb on rocks and things. He loves to do agility type stuff. Hawkeye hates it. So I wouldn't want to make Hawkeye do agility stuff. You know what Hawkeye likes to do?
sleep.
He likes to pee on stuff and turf scratch. So when I was first working with him at the shelter, the first time I had him out and he peed on something, which is it's actually a big kind of landmark, right? That they feel comfortable enough to pee on something with you there. And he turf scratched. I did a little with my feet, so we participated in that together. He's like, oh, I gotcha. I've had other fearful dogs that like to dig in the dirt in my yard, so then I'd go dig with them and they're like, oh my gosh, you get me. Like, what's important to me is important to this human. And usually what's important to dogs, we don't acknowledge at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that now I go around doing that with them. I don't. I act like a pretty normal pet owner, but it's kind of that breaking the ice time period that's so important to make that connection with the dog. And you can't be afraid to look like a fool. My neighbors are like, oh, that's a crazy dog lady.
It's okay. There's like one time I had a service dog in training, and I'm going from California to New Jersey. We go to this service dog's potty spot. This dog did not know what to do because it's like there's this object in the middle. It's supposed to be like a thing for them to pee on, but it doesn't look like a hydrant or a tree.
Oh, yeah.
It's this thing, and I'm just like, I don't know about you, dog, but I need to use the bathroom. I'm just gonna pee, and I'm just gonna. It's like, if you need an example, I'm just gonna do it right here. Then he saw that, sniffed a little, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna pee on the wall over there, and I'm like, good boy, and it helped. It worked, and I said, cool. Now
Yep.
we're both good. Now we can go on the plane.
Yep. You got the
Uh,
job done.
yeah. So sometimes that's why we're weird. That's why we're dog people. That's why they always say dog trainers are weird. And I go, yeah, because we do the stuff not normal people would do, and it's totally fine. We do it for the dogs.
It's a grand experiment, right? You can't be afraid to try something
Oh yeah,
because
no.
it might just work, you never know.
Oh, it definitely helped for that one case, and I tell people, and everyone laughs that I had to pee to show the service dog puppy that to pee there,
Well,
and then
now he learned, right?
it
He
worked. It
Good
worked.
job for his owner. So
So, hey Angela, thank you, thank you for the thank you for the praise. There's
thanks,
Jackie,
Angela.
and then let's see, we got Dorothea. Yeah, you can watch the replay like after the live's over. I also have it on my YouTube channel, and like my YouTube channel has like a bunch more interviews like Larry Crone, Tyler Heatherbeck, like all that you guys can go to. Like I want this to be accessible for most, like a lot of people, so they can listen to this and have good info when it comes to like certain topics like this. Let's see.
It'll be
Bonnie.
available for all eternity now. Hey,
Until
Bonnie.
let's see, and then
She was
Bonnie.
a rescue friend in crime when she lived here.
Oh really? That's cool.
Yeah.
Hey Heather, good to hear from you. Congrats on getting married, by the way. And then got Ryan. So yeah, no, that was yeah, no, this topic was I was excited for, because I know I did have this little bit of talk with Jason, but it was more just towards like dogs in the city more than just dogs in general.
Mhm.
And I mean, who else would I talk to about this? And you, Julie, because you're like grand poobah of the fearful dogs, I say. So
Well, unfortunately, I have a lot of practice living here. I mean, I really do have a unique opportunity and lots of dogs at shelters that allow me to go in and help them, which is kind of rare. You know,
hmm
there's other shelters here that nope, I'm not. They don't want me coming in. And
yeah,
that's okay. I mean, I don't. I go to the ones that want my help, but it allows me to get a lot of practice, which is important. But yeah, I'm so glad you asked me to participate. I'm always like, oh, someone asked me to talk. It's kind of
well,
fun.
yeah, well, I think learning. I think like people can definitely appreciate information that like from you, from Phyllis. I think it's just a lot of people you see like watch all these other videos on YouTube, and they just don't know who to look for. Meanwhile, it's just like like, hey, I have this video that says fearful dogs. If you have a fearful dog, it's it's good. And I want people to like go the right direction, because like people just Google something and then they just get lost in this whole internet thing. So
Well, and
if
a lot of the information out there about fearful dogs is for slightly fearful dogs.
Mhm.
Like a lot of dogs that are just slightly fearful, they'll just kind of come out of it on their own in a normal home. But we're talking about, the other ones, The ones who
Mhm.
aren't going to do that. Whoever
Mhm.
that was that said they should come to the workshop, you definitely should. You get to see
Oh,
Nelson work with dogs. It's so much fun. And
yeah,
he
I'm
can
pretty
do it.
yeah, I'm pretty sure Ryan, like I saw him, he was in Utah. Like he's from Utah, and then he did the workshop. He bid hella high for the Nelson workshop. Like he and this other guy bid it so hard, and he went ham about it, and he won. So
Oh, cool.
he's
That's
excited to
cool.
bring excited to bring his employees there. It'll be
Well, it's good. It's always good to have people come out to New Mexico. And this town that we do the workshop in, it's so small. It's 4 miles wide. And the whole county, I think, has 12,000 people in it. So it's very rural. And they just are so thrilled that, people come from all over to go to this workshop. And it really gives them like a morale boost,
oh
to
yeah.
have us go, and then the staff gets to learn how to help the dogs too, which is always great. So it's training for their staff. But should I plug some of the? Is it time to plug some stuff?
I mean, yeah, we can definitely wrap up, but like I was gonna like I have your thing, the fearful dog thing. So if people want to reach out or people are interested to get in contact with Julie or anything like that, here's her website right here. Uh,
So
and yeah.
I have 2 online courses there, and then Nelson's Fearful Feral Dog online course is also accessible through that link. And then I have other workshops that I'm teaching on my business website, which is Heart to Heart Canine. Um, and I'm teaching, I think, 2 workshops with Phyllis this year, one in Brooklyn and one at Angela Luke's in Virginia. And Kevin's going to come to the one in Brooklyn. And Phyllis kind of does some of the dogs, and I do some of the dogs. It kind of depends who we think the dog might suit better. And then we, discuss how to help dogs according to their temperament, which is kind of, what we were saying before. All dogs are kind of individual, and you have to look at the dog and their surroundings and take into account their environment as well and come up with a plan to help them. And then I'm doing a fearful dog workshop at Angela's in October, I think, by myself. It's my
Oh,
first one.
oh, sweet. That's
So
that's exciting. So
that'll be good.
yeah, yeah, no, that's awesome. And like I said, you're a big wealth of knowledge, Julie. I always appreciate like the tidbits, and when you came out here, it was a good refresher for me. Um, and like thank you for everyone that commented, that watched watched this. Feel free if you guys have any questions, like later on, you can always comment your questions, and then Julie and I'd be happy to message or comment back to answer your questions. But it's yeah, it's always good to have good trainers that have a good niche and just talk about certain topics like this, because there's always going to be like an owner or like somebody that needs to listen to something like this, and it's so helpful. Like I have so many clients or people that I send these videos to, and they say how helpful, how educational it was. So it definitely just makes me feel good doing this, and people enjoy the talks too. Like at this point, I might as well just have my own podcast. But I just do the YouTube stuff, so that might be my next project.
Yeah. Well, I like these things because I'll listen to them in the car, because you really don't have to watch us. You can just listen. So I use it like a podcast too.
Oh
Um,
yeah, it might be a project maybe to 2025. Who knows? So
yeah, I appreciate for everyone listening. And
and
thanks for having me on.
of course, and thank you guys for being patient with the whole Wi-Fi thing. Of course, the heater kind of just short circuit everything, but yeah, Julie and I were gonna wrap it up, and thank you guys for watching, and hope you guys have a good rest of your day. And I'll keep you all posted. I think I got Pat Stewart. I gotta make a post for, and then I've got Hannah Lore about burnout, and I got my friend Heather. We're going to talk about aggression. So stay tuned for those. Will be the last 3 of the interview series. So, all right, guys, you guys have a good one.